In the name of God, most graceful, most merciful, I would like to extend my deepest regards to the Bahraini government for hosting us and hosting this very important conference, which tackles a very, very important and sensitive topic in the life of the entire humanity, not only in Iraq, not only in this region, but in the entire world. As an entry point to discuss this topic, whenever I am to speak about Iraq and the representation of Iraq, I have to speak about the civilization of Iraq, which runs very deep in history. I have to talk about the dimensions of human rights and women's rights that were decreed in Hammurabi's decree almost 1,900 years before Christ. Our country, Iraq, is great. It is tremendous in its history and in its civilization. But here it is today violated flagrantly and blatantly by the forces of evil, which have called themselves ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. I have to mention, even if briefly, the topic of Syria, Iraq, and the regional situation, which is the title of this session. Only yesterday, we were saying that the phenomenon of the Islamic State will spread and reach far beyond the borders of Syria to dominate the entire region. And this is not a secret for any person who has a clear political reading. This reminds me of the war in Germany in the 17th century, the war of the 30 years. It started in Germany, then it broke out to spill over to Sweden, to Denmark, and to other countries in Europe. This is how terrorism breaks out, especially when it benefits from a series of elements. First of all, the idealization and the establishment of a doctrine which is impregnating the mindsets of youngsters in this region. Terrorism is not a contemporary phenomenon in Iraq. It started earlier than that in Washington, in New York, in the early days of the 21st century. Then it's moved to Spain, to European countries, to London, then to Asia, then Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and then Iraq. We are facing a true world war, even if people still are reticent to call it so. It did not start in Iraq, and it might not end there. Moreover, another equally horrendous fact about ISIS is that this group is recruiting youngsters from all over the world. It's true that the fight is unraveling on the Iraqi territories. However, the fighters joining ISIS have come and have flooded Iraq from all over the world, even from democratic and well-advanced countries. Even those countries that were unimaginably willing to participate in such a movement have sent certain fighters to ISIS. We are not blaming these countries, their state institutions, or their peoples, because we know that ISIS has established itself and has attracted these youngsters. However, other countries have come together in Jeddah, in Paris, and in New York to stand alongside Iraq and to say that they support Iraq against this terrorist scourge. Also, ISIS is practicing horrendous acts. It is not discriminating between women, children, the elderly, people from different religious backgrounds. Those of you who think that ISIS truly represents Islam are mistaken and erroneous. ISIS is not related to religion, not even remotely. I've said in 2004 that ISIS has no religion, no confession, and no homeland. Because I have a feeling that even Christian communities will be infiltrated by certain groups that are splinters of ISIS. This terrorist cell will further expand if the world remains silent and adamant on taking any measures towards what this is happening. It will even infiltrate and plague the Buddhist communities and the Hindu communities, because ISIS is not the appanage of any religion. We cannot say that ISIS represents Islam, because Islam is the religion of love, of tolerance, violence of peace. Islam, salam in Arabic, means peace in English. The first thing that we say in our prayers as Muslims is peace be upon God and His Prophet. So the word peace is very primordial, and it's a pillar of Islam. So those who have to abide by the dogmas of Islam have to abdicate any type of violence. What happened in Iraq was not easy for us to digest. We have to move deeper to look at the roots of this phenomenon. How can we find the cultural equivalent which would serve as the nemesis to ISIS? That would be, of course, the paradigm of human rights, the respect of human rights, the respect of women's rights, the condemnation of terrorism in true positions, not only in empty words. We should denounce terrorism for real. We should stand with the peoples oppressed by ISIS. We should never leave these peoples alone to face this scourge. We have to stand, all of us, in unison and seriously express our condemnation of these countries or of the groups that are splinters of ISIS and that have infiltrated Arab countries. Even in the hardest times of conflicts and war, we have to find common grounds and we have to leave our points of discord behind us. Now is not the time to discuss divergences with this government or that, because the threat of ISIS has not spared anyone. In the Second World War, when the world rose to the drum roll of Hitler and Mussolini in Germany and in Italy, everyone stood as one against these two tyrants. From the Far East, also, Stalin stood and reached out to build an alliance with Churchill and others to stand as one against these tyrants. This does not mean that today is the time for us to be selective in choosing our allies. We will build bridges with any organization, of course, with the exception of terrorist organizations. In Iraq, we are very attached to the political course of solving things. We are with building alliances and cooperation channels with any country. From this region to any region of the world, we deal with everyone equally. We have very strong friendships with the countries of this region, including Turkey, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Syria, Jordan, other countries too. So it's only normal for us to cooperate with those countries and to try as much as possible to preserve these friendships. And we are truly sorry for those who think that we have a problem with one country and not the others because of our interests, for example. No, on the contrary, we have mutual interests, we have mutual understandings, but we never interfere in the inner home rules of certain countries to serve other countries' interests. So terrorism today does not spare anyone. No one is safe from the storm. Today, we can only strengthen ourselves and strengthen our barracks by answering back to terrorism. As long as the entire world is suffering from this scourge, we can only stand together as one. The occupation of Mosul was a blatant violation of this city which is diversified in its components, in its confessions. It's a mosaic of religions. It is the second largest city in Iraq. It was pillaged. It was sabotaged. It witnessed massacres of children. It witnessed the selling of women on the black market, women coming from minorities, from religious minorities. This city has witnessed the influx of more than 2 million displaced people, 2 million refugees that fled to other regions within Iraq, namely the Kurdistan province. The same applies to other refugees who fled to Turkey. The government, in such circumstances, tried to deal as much as possible with the infrastructure, and I mean here the social fabric that tried to embrace these terrorist cells. It went back again to its agreement of 20 items stipulating the establishment of a government which includes representatives of all of the Iraqi people's components. All of those living on the Iraqi soil today are represented in our parliament and in our government. Most of the representatives from the parliament come from different minorities, from different religious groups, Muslims, Christians, Yazidis and others. So that was the first step taken by the Iraqi government in order to strengthen and promote the relationships between the Iraqi government and the Kurdish government, the government of the Kurdistan province. And recently we signed an agreement which was very satisfactory and very relieving for a lot of different Iraqi components. At the same time, Dr. Al-Abadi's government is adamant on remaining open to all countries of the world without being selective in choosing its partners and its allies. We truly want to turn the page and turn the tables on our old history and build new ties and new relationships with the world. Now that I have conveyed that message, I have one more thing to say. Since you come from different backgrounds, we need from you military support. Iraq today is the spearhead of the conflict against ISIS through its own sons, the sons of the Iraqi land, including the Iraqi youngsters, including the Peshmergas, including the different young National Guards, the different young national forces. All of those are fighting under the umbrella and under the banner of the Iraqi army. This is why the largest part of the confrontation is taken on by the Iraqis. This does not mean that we can give up on your support or that we can do without your support, whether in terms of air raids, whether in terms of logistics, intelligence information, weapons, training. All of these are necessary components for us. That's on the military hand, on the humanitarian hand, and on the social hand. Since the destruction in Iraq was very wide in scope, we need as much support and help as we can get in order to support the Iraqi people and the Iraqi affected inhabitants, especially that ISIS is trying as much as possible to impose its hegemony on the areas which it occupies, and it tries to empty those areas of their inhabitants. This is why we need support. And now pertaining to our discourse will forever remain peaceful in nature. And we truly beseech all those who participate in this forum and in future fora to come to seek to find common grounds. It is not time now to talk about our discords. It is not time for us now to focus on our divergences. We have a common enemy today. This is why we need to adopt the culture of what's common. What's common is peace, love, friendship, and common interests. Also, positive response is the culture that we need to adopt today. This is the antidote to the extremism which we suffer from today. The peaceful discourse has to be adopted by all. This is what has brought Iraq's unity into light, and this is what has prevented from our conflict from escalating into a Shiite-Sunni split. Even our Ayatollah has spoken about the defense of Iraq, the discourse of Iraq, the peaceful discourse of Iraq, which does not distinguish between Muslims and non-Muslims. Not these titles should be our focus. We should focus on what's common between us. I've heard that certain organizations have been enlisted as terrorist organizations, and I truly hope that you will rethink that, because not only are they not non-terrorist groups, but these groups have also paid high the price of Saddam's regime, and today they are fighting on the Iraqi soil to protect the Iraqi people. The international alliance came a bit late. These groups have been fighting on Iraqi soil ever since these evil groups infiltrated Iraq. These people stood face to face with the fighters of ISIS at gun barrel. Some of those have been elected into parliament. Some of those have even entered into the government via the parliament. So this is why we need to rethink and revisit our definitions of these organizations. We cannot be governed and led by our obsolete thinking towards these groups. I am speaking honestly. I speak for these groups honestly. I defend them honestly and frankly, as long as these groups give Iraq what they are giving it. My dear brethren, I have to commend the sacrifices and the support of the groups and countries that have provided us with help, whether in terms of Air Force supplies or intelligence information. I have to thank you for that. I'm deeply grateful for that kind of help and assistance. And I also call upon neighboring countries to do the same as these European countries and these Western countries that have come to help Iraq. It is only natural by nature. It is only normal for us to expect this from you, since we live side by side. It is only normal for us to beseech you to help Iraq. We need to focus on a contemporary title, ISIS. Let us not shy away from calling things their name, because today this is the main threat for Iraq, and tomorrow it might knock at your doors. It might come to your doorstep. You should fight it today in Iraq. Seize the opportunity to fight it away rather than fighting it on your own homeland. I believe that Canada is one of the most democratic countries of the world. These groups, these terrorists, have entered the House of the Parliament in Canada and have assassinated people from the Parliament. So everything today is contingent upon culture. This forum might and should provide a theoretical definition of ISIS and the fight against terrorism. We cannot fragment our efforts. We should renew our efforts and have them reborn. Now it is no time for us to enlist organizations and categorize them. Today it is not the time for that. Today we should focus on our sole enemy, which is ISIS, and this is why we need to focus on that axis. Thank you very much.